Let's talk about how to amend a tax return from separate to joint, and to talk about when is it worth it, when should you do this, when is it not worth it. I'm going to talk specifically for student loan borrowers in this video who are trying to decide if it makes sense to change their old tax return from separate to joint, because you can get thousands of dollars back as a refund this way. So it's a big deal, but a lot of times it's just not worth it. So let me just show you some of the hacks and things to consider when trying to make this decision. And then we'll show you just the biggest reason that you should amend your tax returns from separate to joint and how much money you could save if you did it. So this is what the 1040X looks like. This is something that you can do up to 3 years in the past. So let's just say hypothetically, you're thinking about amending a return. By April 2025, you could revise returns all the way back to tax year 2021. So it's, think about it like 3 years in the past, but that 3 years in the past is kind of like the deadline is for, the April, whatever tax filing deadline that you would normally have. And so you can see here, one of the questions they ask is amended return filing status. You must check one box even if you're not changing your filing status. And it also cautions you cannot change from joint to separate after the return due date. So you can go from separate to joint, basically. So you can check married filing separately, and you can see that this document here is really pretty short. You can just say, if you want to, explanation of changes or something, you could simply say, changing from separate to joint because of lower tax liability or something like that. So keep it very short to the point. And then so you put in your information and just enter all this information. That's pretty much what you do. So it's not terribly complex in terms of filling out the form, but maybe the more complicated thing is figuring out whether or not you should do it in the first place. So now I'm going to show you a calculator that we've got that you can help think through how to do this. So this is an Excel-based calculator that I built on this married filing separately question. And so if you kind of go in here and you just put in two random persons' incomes, 50K and 50K, right? If you answer, how many kids do you have? Do you have any Medicare, small business? Do you live in any specific community property states? Have you spent any money on daycare, for example? If you answer no to all the questions, you might see a cost of about $500 in this case from filing separately, which you can see into the what's causing that is the student loan interest deduction. So that's the list here of items. Now, if we think about, when does this get really crazy in terms of expenses? Well, if you have one person, let's say that makes $400,000, one person that makes 50, huge costs here, mostly all associated from coming from the spouse at the higher tax bracket being taxed, like a tax rate of a couple making twice this. So that's really what happens with married filing separate versus joint, is the bigger the difference in your incomes, the larger the tax hit. And so when you see somebody with a really large difference in their incomes, then the tax hit can be really enormous. Now, if you have a community property state, a lot of times, like if you live in one of these states in particular, if you say yes to that question, that cost goes way down because you're splitting the income 50-50 on the return. And so you really kind of want to look at amending a return from separate to joint if the cost that you incurred is large. And specifically, anything above $2,000 I think might be worth amending. Anything below that, you might potentially get increased IRS attention on your return, maybe an increased chance of an audit, although that's not for sure. And just is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth your time and effort to go about asking your tax professional to help you do this? Or is it better just to, as they say, let sleeping dogs lie, where I grew up, right? So I think that the idea here is if you have a big hit to your taxes from amending, you can go ahead and amend that from separate to joint. I'm going to show you a quick online calculator that you might use if you want to access the stuff that's in this Excel calculator. So on studentloanplanner.com, if you go to calculators and you look at the tax calculators, you can see this married filing separately tax calculator, and you can pretty much access most of what's in the calculator that I shared. If you want a downloadable version, you can click that, and that'll help you download the calculator. But you can just put in, and again, you find that through this Student Loan Planner website, calculators, and then you can go to that married filing separately tax calculator. So if you put the incomes in, you can put number of children, how much you spend on daycare, who owns a small business, adoption, anyone on Medicare. ACA is a big reason that people have high costs of filing separate. And so you can get an estimate, and then you can see, just the costs of individually the line items of what is driving all these costs. And again, I would just say I would put your numbers in here for a prior tax return where you filed separate, and I would say if that number is showing up greater than 2,000, then I think it's worth reaching out and asking a tax professional to amend that return from separate to joint. We do have options for that help, so you can just go to this calculator, and then you'll see at the bottom of the page, you'll see a questionnaire that you can fill out if you want to decide whether or not you want to work with a firm like ours for tax help. So in general, again, filing separately versus jointly, a lot of times it makes sense from a student loan perspective. If you do incur a large hit to your taxes from filing separately, then you want to look at doing this 1040X, and you want to make sure you do it on time, and then you do get that money refunded back to you. And again, sometimes this can be in the many thousands of dollars. So thanks for watching. If you have questions about amending your tax return, put it in the comments, and thank you for subscribing to Student Loan Planner.